Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Seth.
Thanks for joining me today on this interview. I'm hoping to talk to you a little bit about your job at MSCR, right?
Yes.
As a tennis instructor, as you know, I'm thinking about going into that line of work myself, so I was hoping you could give me a little insight of what it's like.
Of course.
What different settings do you work at your tennis instructing job?
So I have a few different jobs tennis instructing, so that depends on what job it's at. So I work at a middle school, and there I work in a gymnasium. I also work in a gym with one of the MSCR programs, teaching children from the ages of 3 to 7. During the summer and the fall, I work outside teaching lessons, and then during the winter, I teach private lessons inside of the Nielsen Tennis Stadium.
Okay, maybe we could start out talking about the middle school instructing job. What is that like?
Sure.
Who do you work with? Your peers, your students?
So the middle school job, it's not only tennis instruction. So I begin my day around 2:30. I get to the school, and right after the kids get out, I kind of help them get to where they're going. Then at 3 o'clock, I start leading my tennis program. So we work on basic skills depending on their skill level. The really good students will be able to play by themselves, and I'll try to work with the ones that haven't played as much before. Then after that, we play for about 45 minutes, and then they have a break, and then they move on to the other clubs that the school offers.
Okay. At this job, who do you enjoy working with? What age level do you enjoy working with most, would you say?
I usually enjoy working with the 8th graders. There's only 6 to 8th graders in the program, but the 8th graders usually can handle themselves a little bit better, are a little bit more mature, so I enjoy working with them the most.
Yeah. Would the more challenging parts of your job be working with the younger children then, would you say?
It's not necessarily the younger children. It's sometimes when certain groups of friends are in there, they can get pretty wild depending on who they're with. But the people that come every day usually are pretty relaxed, and then the students that come only sometimes are usually the ones that kind of disrupt the lessons a little bit more.
How do you deal with that? How do you control them?
How do I control them? I try to talk to them calmly to begin with. That doesn't always work. If they really are acting out, I have to threaten to send them to the office, which I try not to actually send them, but if they're getting too out of control, I have to do that.
Yeah. Do you have a co-teacher or anything like that at the middle school?
Not for the tennis program. There are other program leaders that teach other clubs, but for the tennis program, it's just me. But after their short break, we move on to other programs, and then I work with other teachers.
Oh, what is that like? What do you work on the teachers with?
We do different clubs, so usually we teach arts and crafts, and then there's sports clubs as well, where they usually play basketball or football.
So, do you take a lot of the skills from tennis instructing do you do kind of the same thing with the arts and crafts and the other clubs, or is it way different jobs?
It's pretty different, and the people that come to tennis are different students. Usually the students that come to arts and crafts are quiet, and they're usually always girls, so they're a little bit easier to work with.
Yeah. All right, well, now we know a little bit more about that. How about the winter session you said? Do you have a different role?
Sure. So during the winter, I work through MSCR again, which is Madison Schools and Community Recreation, and I teach 3 to 7-year-old kids, and most of them have never played before, obviously because they're so young. So we work with easier equipment, so we have bigger balls that are softer and they won't injure the other children. And we begin by teaching the forehand and backhand strokes. So we focus on that for a few lessons, and then we move on to volleys. But the children they have a low attention span, so we have to incorporate a lot of games, so we can't get that many skills in each lesson.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have a co-teacher with this?
Yes.
This program? Okay, how does that work out? Is one more, the enforcer is one more, how do you deal with that?
We're typically pretty equal, I would say. it works out pretty well because the kids can sometimes get a little bit crazy, and it's really helpful to have another person to help calm them down if we need to.
What are the age group you said it was 3 to 7 year olds?
Mm-hmm.
What do the 3-year-olds really, can they do much in the, is it
Not
hard
in-
to teach them skills?
It's kind of difficult to teach them, but after it's a 6-week session, and by the 6th week you can really tell how much they've improved,
Really?
which is always fun to see.
Do you find that rewarding, seeing the
I do.
improvements?
I like to think that I instill a
Yeah.
love of the sport in children. I hope so.
Yeah. What other, how does this job differ from the middle school job? Do you do the same kind of routine with lesson plans, or how do you prepare for your each day at the
This job,
course?
teaching the younger children, is actually a little bit easier to prepare for because it's the same kids every time, and at the middle school, the group can vary. So when I teach the young kids, I know exactly who's coming and who knows what, but at the middle school, it's just kind of whoever wants to do tennis club that day will show up.
Oh.
And so some of the kids have never played before, while some of them are really good, so it's kind of difficult to manage all of those skill levels.
Yeah. So the younger children program at elementary school, correct? Is that the setting?
It's in a MSCR building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's a little more organized then.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So it's sounding to me like you enjoy the MSCR program and the younger children program better. Is that correct?
I don't know if I would enjoy it more, but it is a little bit easier to work with, and it's more of a structured setting day to day than the middle school is.
Mhm. What is the if you were to pick one thing that you could one thing that's most challenging at each job setting, would it be preparation, the dealing with the kids? What would be the most challenging?
I think at the middle school, it's definitely dealing with the kids. The middle school is the after-school program typically caters to lower-income families, and so they have a lot of other issues going on at home that I don't always know about. So a lot of times they just act more out of control, which is difficult. And then, like I said before, they're easily influenced by their friends because they're kind of at that age where being cool is so important to them. So that's difficult at the middle school. At the MSCR Younger Child Program, it can be difficult sometimes because the kids can get really tired because it's in the evening.
Mm.
I think they're just kind of burned out by 6 p.m. and so sometimes they can get a little bit anxious. Their parents are always in the room for that program, and so that can also influence it, and sometimes they just want to stop during the middle of the program and run over to their mom.
Yeah. Would you consider the parents being there helpful to your teaching style, or maybe inhibiting it a little bit?
I think it inhibits it a little bit. I think it's comforting for the children to know where their parents are, but at the same time, I don't necessarily like people watching me teach. I sometimes think that they're passing judgments about my teaching style or something like that, which can distract me a little bit from doing my job.
Yeah. So at the younger children, you start off with, do you do more games with them, like more fun activities to keep them attentive?
Yeah, definitely. I think that just because they're so young, they have a really difficult time focusing on anything, and they don't really want to stand in line and hit one ball because it's just not fun for them. And so if you do that, I don't think they'll end up loving tennis by the end of the program. So I try to incorporate a lot more games into it.
Okay. And then you mentioned one more program with during the summer, you said?
Yeah, so I do a few other programs. During the summer, I've been in a few different positions. So sometimes I teach all day, and then those are kids ranging from 5 years old to about 13. And then in the evenings, I teach adults, which is really fun. And then also in the fall, I teach adults.
Oh, okay. And what is the setting of this teaching? Where do you teach the kids? The same setting as the adults?
Yeah, typically it's just around different tennis courts in Madison, so they're all outdoor courts.
Okay. Do you prefer that setting to an indoor gymnasium?
I do, because I think it's a lot easier to play a little bit more seriously on a real tennis court.
Yeah.
With the kids, it's not as difficult, but with the older middle school kids, if they actually want to play a tennis game, they really can't, because the gym isn't conducive for good tennis, because the surface is different. And
would you say it's easier to work with adolescents or adults on average?
I prefer to work with adults because they can ask me questions. Well, so can the adolescents, but the adults tend to ask me more questions on what they're doing, and I can tell that they really want to learn. That's the reason why they're in the lesson. As compared to the children or the adolescents, I think that sometimes their parents just put them in the program because they want them to learn tennis or want them to do something, and the adults signed up because they really want to learn. So I like that.
Do you find the adults respect your authority? Is that something that's hard to deal with at all, or not really?
I think most of the ones that I've taught definitely respect me. There have been a few players that are very, very good and are actually in the wrong level of the tennis program, but not all levels are offered, and I think they just want to get out there and hit. So sometimes I actually have a difficult time offering them advice because I don't see much wrong with their game, and so that can be a little bit difficult because I want to be able to give them feedback, but I can't because they're just as good as I am.
Yeah. And then how do you just kind of let them play on their own then, kind of?
Yeah, typically. There's usually a few students in the class that are above average, so I usually have them hit with each other. If they have questions, then they'll approach me, but typically they're happy with just playing with one another, and then I get the opportunity to work on people that need to develop their skills more.
Okay. What would you say, have you been involved in any conflict with either child or adult that you had probably more child acting out? Do you somehow punish them, or how do you deal with misbehaving students?
It really depends on what they're doing. I've never had to deal with an adult conflict like that, but I've definitely had to deal with children. A lot of times, certain children in the lessons are influencing each other, so I begin by splitting them up. If that doesn't work, which often it doesn't, sometimes I'll have to have the kids sit out of the lesson because they're so out of control.
So overall, thinking back on your three settings, from what I heard, you enjoyed the adult lessons the best. That's maybe your more cup of tea, as one would say.
I would say it is as well. Okay. I like the fact that they appreciate the sport more, and they really invest their time and effort into learning how to play. And at the end, they're usually pretty gracious towards me, and they thank me, whereas the children, just because they're kids, don't do that. I think the adults appreciate me a little bit more.
That's great. Thank you for telling me about your job.
No problem.
Have
Good luck to you.
Thank you.